You're part of a dying breed, Habsburg, like people who can name all 50 states. The truth hurts, doesn't it, Habsburg? Oh, sure. Maybe not as much as jumping on a bicycle with a seat missing, but it hurts.
We are back. You're listening to Real Side on GCN Live. Always a pleasure to have you with me. 855-REAL-JOE. 855-732-5563. Listen, you know what? I so much appreciate the time that you're spending with us on the air, in the chat room, texting, tweeting, and being part of the conversation. And fresh off a great series here, David Fischer, CEO of Landmark Capital, joins me. David, I got to tell you something. A lot of good comments. We spent the last 3 weeks going over the how money flows through the system, how it works, and that kind of thing. And again, every once in a while we should do that as a refresher course because people really enjoyed what you had to say and the information they got from it.
Well, that's great. Once they, understand like the ABCs, they can build off of that, and then everything else starts to make sense. Because that's how our monetary system works. So I was, very glad that you asked me to do that 3-part series, and we'll revisit that in the future sometime.
Yeah, so simple. So, that's the thing. I always say it about you, and it's true. I mean, it's simple, stupid. You keep it simple so people can understand and have a clue as to what it is they need to do with their money or what they need to watch for. But hey, the roller coaster ride's back, right? I mean, seriously, and again, I don't like roller coasters, So.
The roller coaster has been the new ride this year. I said it was going to be, and it's definitely here.
But it's all tariff driven at this point, isn't it? Or mostly?
Mostly, yeah. That's what makes the roller coaster go down usually. Then there's some good news that comes to the market, and it causes the upswing of the market a little bit. Or usually it's saying, it's contained the tariffs or they're not going to happen. So the good news that comes out in the aftermath of the bad news, which causes the market to go up. But, now that the market's down again today. So Friday the markets were down, and today or yesterday they were up, and now they're down again today. So it's a roller coaster ride.
Well, again, back to why the tariffs, why is it causing such a rock in the market, if you would be? Give us some insight as to what's going on with it. I'm
going to give you quite a bit of insight, and some people might say there's a little bit of conspiracy here. I'm not a conspiracist. You'll see why in a second. But on Friday, President Trump tweeted to authorize doubling down on tariffs, specifically in steel and aluminum, only with the country of Turkey. So he raised the tariffs to 20 and 50%, 20% for aluminum and steel at 50%.
Right.
Huge. Only that country. He also cited that our relationship with Turkey at that time and hasn't been good. Here's what happened. Turkey's currency, the lira, went down 22% in a week previous to this, and during this, it's down year to date 36%. The Turkish economy is number 17 in the world. There's a clear reason why President Trump did all this. Now let's get into that. This is the news that's not being talked about on financial news, but there's reasoning behind this. Back in 2016, there was a coup plan that failed to assassinate or even maybe dethrone the president of Turkey. And that was done in August. There's a person that lives in the United States for 16 years who's a Turkish citizen, got a green card through the CIA. And this is, mainstream media talked about this back then. In fact, even President Obama commented on these things. So, this part here is not conspiracy. But when the failed attempt on the president's life, they said it was the United States that was behind all this. In fact, it came out in their paper, one of the largest paper, that the United States was behind this. They even said in their paper that this was a failed attempt by the United States. So another paper came out and said, and did reported a survey that was done on Twitter saying 69% of the people said that the CIA was behind this, and the next second entity said it was the White House, 20%. So this is the conspiracy that the Turkish news media is putting out way back in 2016 till now. So your people are saying, what does that got to do with what? This is 2 years later. Well, here's what happened recently. President Trump, behind the scenes, along with Vice President Mike Pence, has been working with the Turkish officials to release a person recently that was detained. In fact, you might have heard of this person. He's a Presbyterian minister, evangelical minister from North Carolina, Steve.
I can't remember his name either, but I know who you're talking about.
What's his name here?
Just keep going. Don't worry
Tom
about it.
Brunin is his name.
All right.
My friend Steve Noble, who I'm on his national network, who's out of North Carolina, knows him. So anyway, recently it's a tit for tat because in 2016, Turkey issued a warrant for the arrest of Fethullah Gulen, who's the person who's living in the United States for 16 years, and said, he orchestrated this whole thing. He's a cleric Muslim, and trying to dethrone that, which he is innocent. He's not done that. At least that's what the reports are coming out and saying. So the retaliation came by Turkish officials this year seizing several U.S. citizens. One of them is a scientist from NASA who was on visiting his family in Turkey. And the day before he was getting ready to leave on a plane back home to America here, he was seized. And another person is this evangelical pastor who has been seized, and he's under house arrest. So they've been negotiating with the Turkish officials, trying to release them, and they were not wanting to do that. So President Trump upped the ante, and he's using tariffs as a bargaining tool to get Turkey to come to the table to negotiate. And Turkey's just dug their heels in. That's reeling on the markets, causing, all the markets. Gold came down. The Turkish government sold 10 billion US dollars because of this to inject money in their system. They released 6 billion liras, their currency in the system. They sold $3 billion in gold here recently. That's what caused gold to go down to recently a little bit. So it's just affecting the market, but this is all generated because politics behind the scenes of
Politics?
Turkey.
No.
Yeah, politics is dictating the markets today. It's funny how this one little small thing that's not based upon fact is blowing up into this huge thing. That just tells you how, when somebody says something and it says to another person and pretty soon it gets twisted, it becomes the truth, and it affects a lot of people. This is what's happening in the markets, unfortunately.
Okay, now with all that said, people need to get some oxygen. We'll be back in a minute. I'm Joe Lucene, your host. Always a pleasure to have you with me. Heat up your coffee, cool down your drink, whatever it is you're doing. David Fischer will still be with me on the other side of the break. We'll be right back.
Sorry.
We are back. You listen to The Real Side on GCN Live. Always a pleasure to have you with me. 855-REAL-JOE, 855-732-5563. David Fischer joins me. He's the CEO of Landmark Capital. Always a pleasure to have him with me. And like I always say, he explains things to us in plain, simple English. You can understand your finance. You understand how stocks work. And today, he's trying to explain Turkish politics and its effect on the market. Plain, simple English. Right, David?
Turkey's a very different country. My wife and I have been there back in 2014. Obviously, I wouldn't go there today. But yeah, it's very strange. And just to kind of give a couple more heads up on this, they thought the commentators on Wall Street thought the market, this was all contained. And that's why we had an uptick on Tuesday. But today the market is down because Turkey responded to the tariffs and did a retaliatory tariffs on U.S. Cars, alcohol, tobacco, cosmetics, other products. to the tune of 120% rise in tariffs on cars, 140% on U.S. alcoholic drinks, and 60% on tobacco products. So they're fighting back on this thing. President Trump responded in tweeting. He says, Pastor Andrew Brunson, that's his name, is a fine gentleman, a Christian leader in the United States. He's on trial and being persecuted in Turkey for no reason. They call him a spy. I'm more of a spy than he is, and hopefully he will be allowed to come home to visit his beautiful family where he belongs. So the president is going to bat for American citizens here, specifically Andrew Brunson and others, trying to get them out of this type of hot water that the Turkish country is putting them in. And unfortunately, we're going to see tariffs being used as a weapon back and forth here in the short term of this until something changes.
Yeah, it's really funny. In listening on the radio, obviously, and reading some stories, some people feel like that Trump is using this, or Trump is trying to use this, the tariffs, as a way to get things back in line again, almost like a carrot to dangle in the face of some of these leaders. And when you look at what happened in the EU, what was it, a couple of weeks back, where they're now looking at a possibility of a zero tariff kind of agreement. What do you think about that?
Well, nothing's been put into effect yet, or nothing has been fully. There's a possibility. There's actually no agreements that have come about yet. The closest one is the EU, the furthest one away. You know, what I think about that is, tariffs are being used as a tool. There's between the European Union and us, there is negotiations. Nothing has been agreed upon as of yet. I hope they will. That's one reason why Harley-Davidson is moving a portion of their factory over to Europe, because they need to sustain their revenue, and it's an emerging market for them, and they can't compete with the tariffs, so that's why they're doing that. But 94% of their products are still being manufactured in the United States. Mexico, there's no agreement. China, none whatsoever. They're just digging their heels in. So we're not getting anywhere on tariffs. That is the hope, the purpose of tariffs, though. But it's not really working as of yet. It's still early in the picture.
It's funny. I was reading an article over the weekend about how Harley-Davidson had been looking to open up a pretty large plant over in Europe for several reasons. One is the market here in this country for them has slowly been dying off over the last 5, 6, 7 years, because their consumers are getting older. Their average consumer used to be 30, 40 plus years. Now it's higher than that. So they're looking, and the markets in Europe have been growing, but not to the same level they would be growing here. I think Harley is a what do you want to call it? A niche market, if you would. I mean, Harley is an American market, and I don't see young people driving cars, let alone bikes anymore. The young kids I see are on those BMWs, and they're moving at 300 miles an hour down crazy roads and stuff like that. So I think part of that, and again, you're the expert, I'm not. I think part of that is a sign of the times and sign of our culture, if you would.
Well, this is no different than any other corporation doing the same. Tesla, whose U.S. company, is wanting to build a major manufacturing plant in China. I mean, and that's where they're going to manufacture most of their cars, yet they're going to come over and be shipped over to America. Right. Apple's done the same thing. The iPhone is not really manufactured here. It's manufactured in China. So, and ironically, the CEO of Apple just recently met with the president in the White House over these things behind closed doors. So it is something that's been happening quite some time, but you're exactly right. With Harley-Davidson, to stay in business the long haul, they're having to do what other companies have already done because of tariffs that have been put into place decades ago. If all the tariffs were lifted, we'd have a level playing field. But, that's not a realistic thing, because that's not what countries do. They're after their own interests, just like President Trump is after our own interest. Sure. So is the European Union. So is Mexico. So is China. And that's why we have what we have. And that's why we have a global society that is intertwined. And when one hiccups or gets a cold, the other one, turns into a whole market turmoil. So, I mean, this is just part of it. And to go put the baby back in the womb is probably a very challenging thing, because the environment is global now. It doesn't work the way it used to be in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s.
You know, it's really funny. You hit on something there where you said the Turkish president has been telling people don't buy American, right? And he says, you know, when it comes to your cell phones, you know, buy Samsung because they're from South Korea. And I was just laughing when you were talking there because the iPhone is made in China, right? I mean, seriously, let's give it some thought. I mean, there's nothing. He's not going to benefit American workers, if you would, by telling them not to buy the iPhone here. I just thought that was a little.
Well, it would benefit Apple stock and it would benefit Apple revenue, but it's not going to benefit America as far as American workers, but it would benefit anybody investing in Apple stock. So I mean, there's a correlation, but he's a little bit off on on connecting it all together. That's why Tim Cook recently met with President Trump, because his fear is that if the escalation of tariffs continue to rise, that China might implement a don't buy Apple phones or any iPads anymore in China, and maybe put restrictions on products that they use for manufacturing an iPhone, on tariffs on those, which would cause the iPhone to cost more. So, I mean, it's all political right now, and that's why everybody's talking and gesturing, why Harley's CEO is writing a letter to the president and Congress, the 78 members, why he's writing a letter to all his dealers and distributors, and, you know, why Apple is doing the same thing. It's just they're all concerned about the unknowing of what might happen, you know, if this thing continues to escalate.
Yeah, you know, you look at, let's just go to China for a second. I know that we didn't talk about this earlier, but I've been a victim of, when I was had a computer company, I've been a victim of China, you know, stealing intellectual property and you know, ripping off software companies and that kind of thing, reverse engineering equipment and others. I mean, what is the strategy? Because that does hurt other companies. I mean, it hurt us financially, and we were a small company. How do you get that under control if it isn't through tariffs and or, you know, I think at one point the president said, look, I'll drop these tariffs down if you agree to stop doing A, B, and C.
Well, China is a closed economy when it comes to other companies going in and actually building products in their country. There's a thing called technology transfer, which is what China requires of companies that want to come in and build and manufacturing plants in their country. So if Tesla goes that route, just like Apple had to, they had to, you know, disclose how they build their phone. Tesla will have to disclose their technology on how they build an electronic car.
Wow.
So this is not something illegal. It's a requirement of the government of China. So what makes it one step further is then they take that technology, then they replicate it, and they take that because they haven't bought the rights for it, because it has been trademarked and the rights of it have been protected through international mechanisms. That's the illegal side of this. And until the government of China puts their foot down and says, you will no longer do this, we're going to continue to have that. And I don't see the Chinese government doing that, because think about where's all the new components coming out of. All the new technology does not come from China. It comes from the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
we just manufacture it in a cheap labor force called China.
Yeah, but I always get a kick out of this, and I tell people this because I've been in the technology business for so long. You know, you see something come out, and then shortly thereafter, China's made knockoff copies of the iPhone for years, and people don't realize that, along with other things. But hey, we've got to go for a break because, unlike China, we believe in real capitalism. I'm Joe Messina, your host. Listen to The Real Side on GCN Live. David Fischer joins me on the other side of the break. Don't go far. Heat up your coffee, cool down your drink, or just sit there. Don't move. We'll be right back.
You know, you two girls have everything. You're tall and short and slim and stout and blonde and brunette. And that's just the kind of a girl I crave.
are back. You listen to The Real Side on GCN Live. Always a pleasure to have you with me. 855-REAL-JOE, 855-732-5563. Send me an email to joe at therealside.com, joe at therealside.com. Hey, listen, so we don't get too far into this, David Fischer is joining me. He's the CEO of Landmark Capital. You need to head over to the website, but wait till the show is over, okay? It's landmarkgold.com, landmarkgold.com, or you can call it 844-715-7311. Dad, send me an email if you didn't get that. I'll send you the number later. 844-715-7311. David, Turkey selling off gold. So what's the big whoop? People sell off gold all the time.
Well, this is because they got to raise capital quickly to support their economy. And, you know, that type of a sell-off, the other central banks are standing there with wide open arms waiting for this type of gold to be sold because there's not a lot of gold production going on right now and hasn't been for for years. We've reached what you call peak gold already. In other words, the production is down and will continue to be so for probably well over a decade, if not longer. So when a sale announcement comes to the market and they need to raise immediate capital at selling gold, all the other central banks, the large ones, stand up and say, great, let me buy at a discounted price. So I've seen this happen before at much lower levels in gold than it is now. I've seen it happen at higher levels than gold. This is just a country in trouble, but a $3 billion sell-off in the gold market should have caused gold to go down $50 to $75. It didn't do that. It did much less than that. And percentage-wise, it's about down the same percentage the Dow is down, so it's really not a sell-off because of gold causing it, but it's a flight to the dollar, and the dollar's gone up a huge 8% this year. So gold should be down hundreds and hundreds of dollars with the currency of the dollar rising where it's at. I'm not concerned about all this in any way, shape, or form.
All right. So you know, we've been talking about tariffs and we're just again, like I said to you earlier, no disrespect to you, obviously, but you know, it's almost like there's three sides to this particular coin as to how people feel about it. And what are tariffs really doing? I mean, are we winning with the strategy? Are we kind of losing with the strategy? Is it flatlined? Is there a mind? Talk to me. What's going on with these?
Well, it just depends on first of all your political view, but also what yardstick you have. And just for the record, again, I support President Trump. He's our president. I pray for him. I get what he's trying to do. And he wants to make America great. And I'm 100% behind that. Am I 100% behind tariffs? The answer is no. Will they work? Maybe. I don't know. It's too early in the game. But I've said there's never been a time in history where tariffs actually worked. So we don't have a point in time where we can draw from saying this benefited America or benefited any country. It's never benefited any country over the period of time where the tariffs were implemented. And so I don't have anything to draw on. All we have is what's happened since tariffs have been put into place. But let's take a look at a couple of things here. The stock market, if you're using that as an index of how they've been successful since tariffs have been put in place, well, the market's up about 6%, and other markets are down. Global markets are down about the same. So it's worked from that standpoint, but I don't know if that's because of tariffs. I think it's just because all other markets are down and have been down for quite a few years here, while the U.S. market and economy seems to be growing. So the dollar is up 4.5% since tariffs have been put into place, 8% this year. So I guess it's working from that standpoint. But the problem with that is that works against us, though, and it just creates a larger trade deficit because it makes our products cost more. So it's not working from that standpoint. Jobs, this is going to be a shocking fact here. There was a survey that was done through economists on CNBC, and the leading economists agreed that it was a 5-to-1 ratio. For every one job that was saved, 5 jobs have been lost due to tariffs. So that's one of the misunderstandings that's going to create jobs. President Trump said that in a tweet. He also said that it's working big time in a tweet. Well, let's take a look at that. The trade deficit has risen $100 billion since tariffs have been put into place. So it hasn't causing that to go down. The dollar strengthening, only no deals have been made. Mexico is far away. Like we said, China is digging their heels in. There might be a deal possibly with Europe and us. When he's tweeted every country wants to take their wealth out of the United States, every country is after their own best interests. That's why President Trump wants to make America great. So it's the same thing that's happening. What we want, they want also. He said in a tweet, I'll tax them, let them come. If they don't want to be taxed, let them make or build their product in the U.S. That actually, we're seeing companies having to pay higher taxes through tariffs. And that's all a tariff is a tax, Joe. But this gets passed off to the consumer, unfortunately. And $21 trillion has come in to pay, we have a $21 trillion debt. Tariff revenue is in the billions. About $22 billion have come in. President Trump said, so tariffs are going to pay down the national debt in a tweet. We're talking billions have come in, but the national debt has grown 1.6 trillion since President Trump's been in office, and we're ballooning the treasuries, and we'll talk about that next week on your program. There's a big announcement. We don't have time for that, and I don't want to convolute topics here. But there's about $12 billion that the United States is paying out to farm subsidiaries, farmers like soybean farmers, other crop farmers. So there's not a whole lot of revenue coming into our country because of tariffs to pay down the debt. So it's not a clear path yet. It might work, but it's way too early in the assessment to say this is working. And companies are just coming back left and right and building projects for industry and manufacturing in the United States. If anything, it's the opposite, unfortunately. So those are the fact checks. Some of the things that are not quite accurate, unfortunately, what our president is saying.
Yeah, and again, I don't know the long-term effects. I know that, you always see something happen and everybody starts screaming about it. It's not going to work, not going to work. And, he's looking at things from a business perspective. And I get it. Look, my argument has always been this, and I'm not the economic expert. I say fair trade with Mexico when you look at the manufacturing that's been done right over the border. And they don't have a union to deal with. They don't have these EPA requirements to deal with. I mean, there's so many things that they don't have to deal with. How is that fair trade? How is that fair and equitable trade? And some of my capitalistic friends will say, well, you just work around it. Well, you can't work around, union fees, EPA fees, and building codes that are just crazy, correct?
Well, that's what makes America great. We have, things in place to make and support our country and make America not only great, but safe. And making America safe costs money. So making factories safe where the American citizen can work, that's a thing that does cost money.
Right.
So labor union laws, and I'm not a pro-labor union person because I'm a free capital guy, but I understand the purpose of it. There's purpose, reasons to have OSHA and all those things that our government has formed, and there's some detriment to it, obviously, but you don't want to kick out the baby with the bathwater. That's what has made people flock to America, because this is the land of the free and the great. And that's what makes people want to live in America and be like Americans, even though they might not have been born here. And I'm not for opening borders or anything like that, so don't mislead what I just said. But it does cost money. And that's how this works.
I'm not disputing that, but I mean, it's a conversation we have on the show a lot. I have a lot of the listeners, which is, look, if Japan doesn't have these things in place and Mexico doesn't have these things in place and it adds, just pull a number out of the air, 20% to the bottom line, then what would be wrong with a 20% tariff?
But you can't blame Japan or Mexico for not having these things in place, because we do. They should rise to the occasion. If they don't want to do that, that's their choice. But there should be an incentive for a person wanting to buy an American car, American manufactured product, because of those things. That's why I believe in buying American products. But we are going to face the dilemma that wages are so much cheaper in other countries. That's why factories are being moved abroad, and they don't have the same criteria is they don't have OSHA in Japan or China, and U.S. manufacturing companies. So it's just something that is innate, that's been put into place for decades, and I don't see that this is going to force American companies with manufacturing plants abroad to be uplifting what they've done for decades and uprooting and coming to America. It's a strategy that probably won't work.
Well, hey, look, and we'll know when it plays out. Okay, you got about a half a minute here. You've got a newsletter, and it's a little interesting that we've kind of changed it this time to about trade and tariffs. And how do they get it?
Well, it's called Tariffs, the Untold Story Part 1. Obviously, there's a Part 2 coming out. It talks a lot more than what I've been able to share with on your program. They can get a hold of it by calling the old-fashioned way, 844-715-7311. Or they can go to our website, landmarkgold.com.
Always a pleasure, David. Thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, and great to be back with you on your program.
Meeting is adjourned. Oh, I am sorry, sir. I didn't mean to overstep my bounds. You say that.
What?
Meeting is adjourned.
It is?
No, you say that, Governor.
What?
Meeting is adjourned.
It is?